microphone. Of course, if you have questions, unmute, ask your questions as we go along. We've already done our introductions. So I'm going to begin with defining what 504 is. It falls under federal law, and it is designed to protect the rights of individuals with disabilities and programs and activities that receive federal and financial assistance. So as we go forward today, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between 504 and IDEA as well. No otherwise qualified individual with a disability shall solely by reason of her or his disability be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So if a student has a disability, then we certainly need to make sure that they have all of the accommodations and that all of their needs are met, whether it is through an IEP or a 504. And again, this is federal law, and the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this compares to IDEA as well. So this Venn diagram is a really good indication of how they're similar and how they're different. And if you'll just look at the middle section there, you'll see that many of the same policies and procedures that apply with IDEA also apply with Section 504. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to get my full screen up here. Y'all can still see, right? Okay. Okay, so procedural due process, FAPE, child find, all of these in the middle, you will find whether this is a child under IDEA or Section 504. The difference is Section 504 is guided by legislation and IDEA is guided by procedures. There's no funding for 504. There is funding available for students who qualify under IDEA. There is not an IEP for students who meet 504, but you do put a plan in place to meet the needs of all of those students. Least restrictive environment is considered for IDEA and must be enforced. And then also you have to consider that for the educational setting under 504. There is an annual review required under IDEA. And under Section 504, it calls for periodic review. However, in Gulfport, our procedures require that we do it annually. So those are some of the similarities and differences between the two. We have procedures in place, and a lot of this is in the guide that we have, but I just want to go over with you page numbers that you can find this information. So the first one, obviously, it's important that you know that this is falls under the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. There is actually no authority of the State Department of Education regarding 504s. And I think that is probably why in my 5 years in this department, we have only had one training from the State Department. So they pretty much stay out. Of course, they want to guide us and make sure that we have it, but this falls under the local guidance and federal law. So State Departments of Education really have no authority when it comes to 504s. Each school district must have a grievance procedure, and we do have that. So I sent you all the procedures and guidelines in a Google file or attached it to the calendar. I'm also going to print that and put it in a book for you and put that in the mail. But the grievance procedures are found on pages 4 and 11 in that book. Districts must also identify who's going to be responsible for making sure that we're in compliance. And for Gulfport School District, that is me. And my contact information is right there on the front page of the table of contents of our procedural manual. And then we also have to have procedural safeguards in place, just like you would for a child who has an IEP. Those safeguards that our district has prepared are on page 6 of the manual. Okay, so who qualifies as a 504 student? This is sometimes very difficult to discern, but these are 3 guiding principles that you consider when you're trying to identify if a child qualifies for 504. First of all, if there is a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities, okay? That's the major definition. But you also want to consider students if they have a record of an impairment or are in regard as having such an impairment. So if someone thinks or has had conversations, you want to make sure that you look into all of those situations as well. A physical or mental impairment, that covers a lot of areas, obviously, but it has to be enough that it substantially interferes with one or more major life activities. So these are some examples, but just think about your life activities that you have to have on a daily basis, okay? Eating, the swallowing, whether we can hear, regular sleep, vision, the reading and the writing, and even like the thought processes, those can also be considered major life activities. And so we consider that also when we are looking at 504s. Okay, and again, these are some more examples. You are going to have a copy of this PowerPoint, and the information that I gave you in the procedural manual, there's another PowerPoint. The one, like I said, that I did attend with the State Department is in that manual. And there's some other information from a training that I went to with Jim Keith, who is one of the State Board of Education lawyers. So I really love attending his sessions as a 504 coordinator. If you ever have that opportunity, he's very knowledgeable and very thorough. So again, his name is Jim Keith. And I will keep my ears open if I hear of anything that would be virtual. That is something that I would encourage all of you to do, is to attend one of his trainings. But again, this lists some of the definitions of what a disability would be that would qualify for 504. And these are some areas that usually are not substantially limiting. They may have limits and they may hinder a child, but it's not usually long-term or substantially limiting. So, you know, I saw one earlier, like, you can see most of these are very 2 or 3 weeks and they're going to be fine and back to themselves. If a child does have an illness or an injury and it's long-term, like for example, a trach comes to mind, and those sometimes are temporary situations, that would be a case where you would consider a 504. But a broken arm, a broken leg, that within a matter of a few weeks, that would not usually qualify for 504s. Okay, this is one that is often a little difficult, I think, probably to accept, but we do not consider mitigating measures when determining whether a student has a disability. So what that means is, let's say a child is ADHD, but the mother refuses to give the child the medicine. When we are determining whether or not they're going to qualify for 504, we can't say, no, he doesn't qualify because he's not on his medicine. We cannot use medicine as one of the measures to determine that. We know that the doctor has prescribed it, but we cannot use that as an example. So you see the definition at the bottom there, that mitigating measures are medications and assistive devices that an individual uses to eliminate or reduce the effects of an impairment. So that was kind of difficult to accept, but that is in the law, that we do not consider those when we are making a determination. And another thing that is not sufficient on its own would be to look at a child's grades. That can certainly be one of the factors that we do consider, but grades alone is not enough to determine if a child has a disability. And all of you know that if you've put a child through the TST process or anything of that nature, you look at multiple indicators, and that's the same with 504. So, what if you get a doctor's note? Is that an automatic 504? No, not even if it's Dr. McDreamy, okay? It is not automatic, but the committee can consider that and should consider that documentation along with any other indicators that they have. But it does not automatically, you know, the doctor writes you a note and they say, okay, I want James Smith to have a 504. You consider that, but you do not automatically give a 504. And in making these determinations, keep in mind that although you're the 504 coordinator, it is never your sole responsibility to make any decisions with 504. It is always a team, a committee effort. And in Gulfport, we usually use that as our TST committee. They work in both the same manners. Your TST committee can be your 504. Now, at your school, if you have a 504 committee completely separate, that's perfectly fine too. But as you progress, you're going to involve that TST committee. Here is the 504 process, and this is all outlined in your procedures that you have in the handbook. But you begin with the referral at the top. And then the TST committee or 504 committee, whichever your school has, will look at all the information that you have, and you start basically that TST process. You're going to put some interventions in place. If those interventions are not successful, you're going to refer to the LSC. And then we're going to start looking at whether or not we need to evaluate for eligibility. And so we're going to notify the parents in writing. They have to have due process, which again, those procedural safeguards are in your manual, and they're also on the Google Drive. So I'll share that with you if you don't already have access. But the parents must have that in writing. And then the results of that assessment, you're going to, if it doesn't indicate that the child qualifies for special education, you want to move into considering a 504. Now, that does not mean, okay, this child went through testing, they did not qualify, they automatically get a 504. It means we consider 504. The committee is going to sit down, they're going to look at all of the information and make a determination of whether or not they need to put a plan in place, okay? So a lot of times I do hear people saying, well, they didn't qualify for special ed, so we're going to give them a 504. It's not automatic, but it is the next step in considering, okay? And then another point when you would move directly to the 504 is if that LSC reviews the information and they determine that it's not necessary to do a comprehensive assessment. And really that trach situation that I was telling you about could be a possible situation where the LSC would say, okay, this is temporary. We're not going to go forward with a comprehensive assessment, but we do need a medical plan in place. And so we might move straight into that, developing a plan by referring back to the committee. So once you have that plan in place, you're going to review it annually. And then like when you're reviewing it, you're just checking to make sure those accommodations are still needed, making sure that the qualifications are still there. If anything has changed, you want to consider that when you're looking at whether or not you need to modify that plan. And then every 3 years, you want to reevaluate. And the TST team can determine how that looks. You can take them back through the entire comprehensive assessment piece, or if the team has enough evidence there to make the decision that they're going to continue with the same procedures, they can do that as well. But you do still look at it every 3 years and reevaluate. Any questions so far about the process or the procedures? Okay. Once you have a written plan, it's very important that everyone who services that child has a copy of that plan, because they are responsible for following through with those accommodations. It's just like an IEP. You want to make sure that anyone that child's going to be in contact during the day with for services, for example, if they go to activity teachers and they're supposed to be sitting on the front in the front seat, then they need to do that in those classrooms as well. So make sure that everyone who needs a copy has a copy. That's really important. And I am actually one of those people who needs a copy. So I'm going to go over with you in just a few minutes all of the steps that you'll follow to make sure that I get that copy. But I do want to also point out your assessment coordinators. It's very important that they have a copy of the plan, because that's part of the requirements under accommodations for state assessment. And they'll have to do a lot of setup and prep to make sure that they have the accommodations lined up for them. So just be sure that you communicate. And again, you know, like if it's a classified person, like a bus driver, I see that's mentioned, they might not need a full copy of the plan, but they need to know. If a child has behavioral issues and they're going to be violent and aggressive, and you have steps and measures in place so that those things won't happen, you need to communicate that with the driver so that they can be mindful of that, and make sure that everyone is safe on the school bus as well. Okay, so again, these are the process. This is the process. You refer the student if you suspect they have a disability, or if you know that they have a disability. Then you evaluate them. It is important that you make sure the parents are given their safeguards, and then you develop a plan. All staff need to be involved in the implementation of the plan. You're going to review it annually in Gulfport and do a periodic reeval, which we do that every 3 years. On this screen here, you'll notice over to the left side, it says GSD Section 504 Procedures. When you get this PowerPoint, that's actually a link to the manual. So you have it online, as well as you will have another copy of it sent to you. Okay, here are some common errors with 504. A lot of times we will just assume like that broken arm or that broken leg, they have a disability, so they're automatically eligible. We want to take it to the TST committee if we're not sure, but a disability is not an automatic eligibility. Okay, and again, same with medical diagnosis. Automatically excluding a temporary disability. We do not want to make any automatic exclusions. We want the TST committee to meet and to discuss it and make a determination. It's really a case-by-case situation on what is best for that child. I had this call the other day. A new student moved in from out of state, and they have a 504. Do we automatically accept that 504? What you do is your team is going to meet, and you're going to review what's in that 504, and based on the information that you have, the team will determine whether or not you're going to continue it. But you can certainly amend it and change the accommodations if you need to. If the student's not exhibiting any of the behaviors, I would certainly not do this right away, because if a child just moves in with a 504, you don't really have enough information to take that 504 away automatically. But your TST committee needs to sit down and review what is in that 504 and make sure that it's something that your teachers can carry through with at your site, and if not, modify that so that it fits what you can do for that child in your school setting. And then failure to dismiss. A lot of times students will lose their eligibility. So if that happens, we need to make sure that we no longer give them the services or code them as 504. When you are completing that plan, it's not a menu, and by that I mean it's not just a checklist that we go down and we say, okay, you get this and this and this and this. You need to have conversation about what's best for that child, and then go to your checklist, the list of various accommodations. You don't want to give more than what is absolutely necessary. Okay, we don't want to limit the child by giving them too many crutches. So give them what's needed, but be careful in not just trying to appease a parent and marking as many accommodations as possible. Make sure they get what they need, but also we don't want to give them too many. Make sure everyone's involved in that plan. Get as many of the staff members and administrators involved as possible to make sure you have all of the information necessary to make a good decision. And then once a plan is written, be sure that everyone knows how to implement that effectively. Make sure that you review that plan at least annually. And again, the menu accommodations, don't overuse accommodations. Another problem in some school districts, and honestly, I haven't heard this in Gulfport, but we would not say we don't do 504s in the district. We certainly do 504s in the district. If a child has a disability, the first thing we do want to do, though, is we want to take them through that comprehensive assessment to make sure we rule out any other areas. And if they don't qualify for special ed, that committee will meet and determine if a 504 is necessary. Now, if you have a parent who says, I want a 504, I don't want an IEP, but the child qualified for special education, there is not an option. You cannot say, okay, I'm going to give you the 504. You have to give them the IEP. Okay, so that's also in the law, and you'll see that in the manual when you get a copy of it. But it's not up to the parent to determine, I just want the 504. Okay, if they qualify, then they get the IEP. If there are behavioral issues, it's important that there are behavior management procedures and steps in that plan. And then, of course, just like with children who have an IEP, if you begin to see a pattern of behaviors, then you need to do a manifestation determination to determine if the disability is the cause or the nature of the behaviors. And so there is a checklist for that in the procedure manual as well. And then one of the things that I have noticed in the past is that sometimes we don't have all of the signatures. It is important that we do have the committee members and a parent. And I know that now it's pretty difficult to get face-to-face meetings, but with something of this nature, I think it's very important to get that parent in to sign. If there is an extenuating circumstance, give me a call and we'll talk about it. But for the most part, that parent needs to come in and sign off on that 504 and make sure they fully understand what accommodations are going to be in place for their child. Okay, so to submit plans to me, we've done it many ways in the past, but this is the easiest way to keep up with the paperwork in an organized manner. I know you're going to have 504s throughout the year, but if you follow these steps, then we won't miss a single file. But before you send me anything, I want you to pull up Chalkable and you do a query, and you'll pull up obviously last name, first name, grades, and then in that first column, there is an indicator called 504 qualification. So you'll click that and then pull a CSV file. And then you can sort it by grade level, however you want to. But if you have 5 names on that list and you have 7 504 plans, then either 2 of them are no longer eligible or have not been input in the computer. Okay, so really think it through, check it out, and make sure that we have everyone coded correctly. Do a little troubleshooting there and make sure that whatever you submit to me matches what is in Chalkable. Okay, if you have 7 in Chalkable and only 5 plans, then in that case, you'll want to, I'm sorry, y'all excuse me just a minute. Okay. In that case, you'll want to possibly remove someone who should not be in Chalkable, but really communicate with your records clerk before you submit this to me, because I keep it on file, and if someone from the Office of Civil Rights comes, I will have all of the records here that I can show them. Of course, I will contact you if necessary, but if there's ever an audit, I'm required to have all of that information on file. So I just need to make sure it's complete and accurate. And if you'll just, like I said, do a little troubleshooting, check it out before submitting it. Then you're going to also send me Form 8, which you just write in the student's name. I think it has their birth date, their MSIS number. So again, this is another checks and balances. You'll have that form, and if you have 5 students listed, then I should have 5 504 plans, okay? So step 3 says you're going to make a copy of each one of your 504 plans and Form 8, okay? And what I want you to do is scan all of those as one document. So when I receive it, I won't get 10 emails with different 504 plans. This is, important information. We just want to make sure that it is secure, and uploading it through Google is more secure than sending it through email. So please don't send through email. Scan those in, and then put your scanned documents in the Google file. And right here on number 5, where Google file is highlighted and underlined, that is a link of where you can put yours in. So like I said, I will send this to you, and it will, when you pull it up, you should only see your school, but you will put your school's information in that folder for me, and then I'll print all of that and keep that on file here. And then once you upload that, if you will email Trina Bruneau and myself and just notify us there's a plan in the Google file. Don't send us the plans. Just say, I've uploaded my plans in the Google file, okay? And then we'll check that. If we have any questions, we will certainly call you back. But we do look for completion. And so, make sure everything is filled out and everything is signed. Then as you get more 504s, if you have any additional ones throughout the year, you're just going to take that form you initially submitted, the Form 8, and add the new students on there and resubmit a copy of that form with any additional plans that you have, okay? So you'll just follow 2 through 6 again, and then we'll have all of those in one place, and it'll be easy for us to keep up with. This is just an easy way for you to get to the links again. The procedures and forms are on that first link, and that is what I'm going to send to you in a book format as well. So you'll have that for quick and easy reference. And then the next one is the Google file where you're going to submit your plans to me. And again, that will be for each school site. So you should not see another school when you pull it up. And I think Bayview Middle School, I still have to send you yours. But most schools, I sent you a file that was in Chalkable to let you know, which students were classified as 504 right now. So I hope that you're looking that over. And then when you send it back to me, just make sure that everything matches up. Okay, that was a lot to say. Any questions, any concerns about 504?